You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
We'll try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, Weekly Art History for All Ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today my guest is Laurie Roberts, the wife of Larry Roberts, a local legend. Like, I grew up in the Chicago area, and I have heard of Larry Roberts' name for a little while. And so now we are going to get some insights into the man and the work from none other than Laurie Roberts. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to be able to speak with you today, Kyle.
So, like I said, this is a little bit sort of surreal for me because, like, I grew up in and around Chicago pretty much my whole life, and I have heard the name Larry Roberts for a while. I have seen, for listeners unfamiliar, it's abstract expressionistic work. I would say, very painterly. There's lots of layers to it, but. I love that I'm going to now get some insights into the man himself. So, Laurie, could you just start us off with, tell us about Larry. What kind of guy was he beyond what we've seen on the canvas?
Well, first of all, for those listening that may not know, that Larry passed away in 2019. And we were together for 30 years, and I've always been a part of his art. And so his art's always been a part of me to start. But to tell you a little bit about Larry grew up in Hudsonville, Michigan, which is just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And he was one of those kids who just could not sit still. He told me the stories of when he was growing up. Today, people would call that ADHD. But back then, it was he didn't know how to channel his energy. And so he managed it by going into the gymnasium, shooting hoops that they let him do to work off steam. And then a real turning point was when he had his first art class. That opened up his world and brought a different way for him to express himself. And that was game changing for him back then.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a common thing. We have beats to similar stories from so many kids. Like, you're struggling to fit in one context, whether it's struggling in the academic subjects or struggling on, the soccer field or struggling in the music. You find, and then all of a sudden you find this spot where it's just like it clicks and it feels, it suddenly makes sense. I feel like that is the case with a lot of people who excel. Like, they struggle in so many different domains, and then they find the one where they fit and they thrive.
Exactly.
And so it sounds like that was the case for Larry. About how old was, like, what are we? I'm trying to think where are we in time when he's finding that art class where things are starting to click for him.
So in the late 60s, early 70s, because he was born in 1963. So it was during that time where it started what is, art? Mm-hmm. Wow, look at these different things that you can use to create and to kind of take yourself away from what you're thinking here and to really channel it into something else. And he was great at, when he was in the studio, he was focused. And that, I think, was such a positive influence. I think art teachers in the elementary schools are so important for children. And I think that every school should have that. There has to be an outlet for kids to be able to channel and learn that there's a different way to channel that energy and to do it in a positive way that also lets you work through those feelings and emotions that you're having.
Absolutely. You'll get no argument from me on that,
Yes. So that was a big thing for him. But when I met him, he was already 25. I was 19. And at that time he was doing painting, but he was doing a lot more sketching. And he also did some really interesting comics that nobody's ever seen. I have this beautiful array of pieces that I kind of keep to myself, but eventually I'll share those. They're just like little moments from when him and I first met, that these pieces, I just remember him sitting there and drawing and sketching and then working on the paints, and how he really gravitated into that in his later 20s, where he really went into painting, not just sketching. He really brought that part into his life.
So that's interesting. So he was early on doing more representational comic, drawings. Because
And
I
figurative.
I haven't seen. I don't picture figurative from him.
Exactly.
I'm not going to pretend to be familiar to the extent that you are,
Yes.
but so that's interesting. So he had early on. Was it like more traditional?
No.
Was this for silly fun? Was this like biting satire? Like what were his comics? What was his lens?
The few that are still surviving, they were comedy about really people. He loved to watch people.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that was, there's one comic where there was a woman dressed up in her fur coat, lipstick, walking down the street, where there's a guy sitting, he's homeless, he's saying something to her and then the dog, and the whole representation of, here you are walking down the street, you're ignoring this person sitting on the street, and how easy it is for people just to walk on by and not see what's right in front of them, or not acknowledge who's there, what's there.
So a bit of a deeper commentary there. Interesting.
Yes. But with his own sarcasm.
And then, so then what was the catalyst for that change in his style? Was it sort of a natural slow progression of him dabbling in different things and found it, or was there like an aha sort of moment for him?
No, I think it was a gradual, because a lot of his early work, he did a lot of sketching, he did drawing, and then he was kind of playing around with airbrush, where he was using a little bit more of that, and kind of experimenting. Where does he want to go? And then he went into really going on to paper really first. So he did a lot of work on paper, and he's very well known for going paper or going on wood directly, because he back in the day in Grand Rapids, he didn't have any money. It was, oh, here's a great piece of masonite, I'm going to grab that and I can paint on it.
And as you say, back in Grand Rapids, forgive me, I feel like I'm skipping around in the narrative here, but
No, that's okay.
We didn't even address,
Oh, yeah.
it's Larry Roberts, Chicago, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
your site, Larry Roberts,
It
Chicago.
is.
So like, and for listeners, if you're looking, check out LarryRobertsChicago.com.
Yes.
But, tell us, when did he come to Chicago? How did that come about? All of that sort of stuff.
So what happened is we were together in Grand Rapids. He was there, and I decided it was time for me to move out of Grand Rapids. I needed something different, something larger that I wanted. And I loved Chicago. I'd been coming here several years in a row, for, I think it was Blues Fest and Jazz Fest, and just kind of seeing the city. And so I said, I'm moving. So for the first couple of months, he was still in Grand Rapids, I was here. And after a few months, he said, that's it, I'm moving to Chicago. I can't continue like this. And I moved I can't remember if I moved in 94 or 95. And then after that, but he said, I can't move until I finish this painting. So needless to say, it was several months later before he actually moved, because he had to finish this painting before he could move, because it couldn't be moved.
Really? Was it just like too massive, or too tied to the area in, the inspiration and everything?
Well, it's a 7-panel piece. So it was part of it's paper on wood, otherwise it's wood panel, and then how he hinged it together. But it goes across all 7 panels. And he was like, I can't move, because he didn't want his thought process and for it to be disturbed while he's working on it. Because a lot of his paintings, they would take a month to work on.
Yeah.
They were not immediate. He's got a few that he did more immediate. They were more quick, but most of his work, it's layer, it's adding, subtracting, it's stepping back, it's the colors, the textures, everything. It's a process.
Well, yeah, I mean, because when you're working with, layers of paint, you
Yes.
got to let it dry before, because, some of the color combinations that we see in there, if you're working wet on wet, it's gonna get too muddy and all of that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And he had, a beautiful sense of color from all my observation of the work. And, you got to get the distinct layers. So that does require a certain amount of dry time between, even with acrylics. Like,
Yes.
I think he was an acrylic guy, right?
Yeah, he's acrylics. He did one oil painting, and that sold. I know the people who have it, and it's a really great piece. But he loved working with acrylic because he felt he could do more with acrylic than he could with oil. He could create different colors and add and subtract the way that he wanted to better with acrylics than what oil would give him.
Yeah. So I guess, before we get too deep into the weeds on the work, more about, the man himself and his creation, like his I always love to know, things like, where was the turning point where he knew that art was not just a fun, almost therapeutic, creative outlet, but like a legit career for him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he fought it. He really fought selling. It was, he would not sell his work until we moved to Chicago.
Really?
And yes, they were such a part of him that it was agonizing for him to let it go.
I can see that.
Yeah, he was like, he poured so much, and when he spent so many months with them, it was like a piece of him was leaving. So I'll never forget it. We were in, we had an art show, and he ended up doing great. He sold 7 pieces during that show. And when they started to come to pick them up, the first woman had bought 2 pieces, and he was like, I don't even know if I can be here when she picks them up. I don't think I can be here. And he had sold 1 or 2, here and there, but he was like, okay, I'm selling it. But at this point, it really, I think, came into his psyche that I'm doing this for a living, and these are going to leave. And even though he wanted people to see them, it was hard for him to relinquish those pieces.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mixed feelings there, because obviously that's a success and it pays the bills and it's a necessity. But it is also, something, like you say, you invest so much of yourself in there. You're parting with almost a little part of yourself in a
Exactly.
way. Yeah.
Yes. So we had to work on that, but he got over it.
Well, clearly he got over it, because he sold more than just a handful of pieces.
Yes, he did.
So what was his, for listeners, we've hinted at the abstract expressionistic connections and the layers of paint and stuff. He grew up 60s, 70s, that's more of like a pop art era. And then probably coming into his own a little bit later. I guess the 80s saw a big sort of neo-expressionistic rise or resurgence, I guess. Who were some of his influences or inspirations?
Well, a couple of the artists that well-known artists that he really admired, Leonardo da Vinci. He
I would
loved
not
him.
have guessed that.
Loved him. So Larry never wanted to study another artist because he wanted to experiment on his own and have his own thoughts.
Mm.
So, but he could appreciate people and for um, their clarity and also how they looked at the world. So he loved how Leonardo looked at the world and how he wasn't into just one thing, right? He had many
Yes.
different, and so that was Larry. He played guitar and piano. He wrote poetry. These were all part of his process while he was in the studio. So,
Yeah.
and music is a big influence on him. He would listen to music all the time, and that definitely was a big influence on him. Another Dolly, he really appreciated Dolly, and H.R. Geiger, which
I,
I have some pieces that of Larry's that remind me a little bit of the H.R. Geiger kind of feel.
so that's interesting. So two out of three of those names I know quite well, but I'm not so familiar with Geiger. Can you tell me a bit about that work?
Well, he's interesting. He was a little bit of a darker kind of fantasy
Mm-hmm.
artist. And Larry liked that because it pushed boundaries
Mm.
and made you kind of think of the world different. It's not, he knew the world was not black and white. There
Yeah.
was so much gray, there's so much undercurrent, and he connected with that on that level of understanding the the world was not necessarily as it seems.
Yeah.
He had a different insight to it. And he really appreciated artists who thought differently. Magritte also was one that he was drawn to. But see, they're nothing like what he is. He appreciated them because they were different and they pushed boundaries and they made you think. It wasn't just here's an apple. It was so much more of when you looked at their work, what am I really looking at?
Yeah, yeah. And well, I think that's interesting. It's one of those things where I guess a really strong artist develops their own voice, so they appreciate the work of others without mimicking the work of
Exactly.
others. And even with that said, there are some elements you take from those artists, or a
Of
feeling of
course.
connection and camaraderie. Like
Yes.
one of the first things you said about Da Vinci, which made perfect sense as I heard it, was like a fellow restless soul. I mean, it really seems like Da Vinci had ADHD. I know I'm not a
Yes.
diagnostician, never met the guy, but it
Right.
really feels like he did because he
Right.
was so into everything. And I guess the nicer way to say it is he was a polymath. He was, doing all the,
Yes.
he had these disparate interests, but and that makes sense. Now before we shift topics to get into the work, I am dying to know, as someone who also loves music and would always have my headphones on while painting anything, what kind of stuff was on his playlist? You said music was a big thing. Was he a
Huge.
jazz guy? Was he a punk guy? What was he into with that?
He was everything. I mean, when we met, he took me, here I am 19. I moved from a smaller town in Michigan to Grand Rapids, and he takes me to my first punk music show. And it was a friend of ours, or a friend of his who became a friend of ours. It was called the Texans. And we went there, and I just remember I was like, my eyes were so large because I'd never seen anything like that. I came from a smaller town. We didn't really have punk to that degree.
Yeah.
And so it was that was inspirational. But he ran the gamut. Johnny Cash was actually big. Black Sabbath.
Okay, so
And
pretty
actually,
pretty
and I have a
different.
5-panel piece. It's called the Quintessence of Light series, but it's actually also named after, each painting is named after a member of Black Sabbath.
Love that.
and they're magnificent. But and so he really loved everything. Sometimes he was listening to jazz or blues or rock or like Django Reinhardt, and he really ran the gamut. But he would get into grooves where all I heard was the same music. But the other part of that is while he's in the studio, sitting to play guitar and piano while he's painting, were a part of it. So he had buddies that he played music with and would do jam sessions. So I have all this music that he recorded that one of his friends is compiling and going to be putting it out out for people to be able to listen to.
Oh, that's so cool. And I, just as a little aside, you had said you were in an even smaller town and didn't have the same thriving music scene.
Yes.
I feel like I do have to also just acknowledge that the greatest musicians I've ever seen in my life were always people from small towns, because credit where credit is due. The small town musicians seem to really focus and hone their craft on a level like I have never seen before. Some people in small towns can play guitar like it is an extension of their body. They just will it to whatever notes.
That's right.
Now, after a short break, I want to get into a little bit more about Larry's work and focus on a specific piece.
Okay, great.
Now, I'm back with Laurie Roberts talking about Larry Roberts and his work. And hopefully I can continue to say those names correctly. And,
I know, it's hard.
Very similar sounding, and longtime listeners know that despite what I do here, talking is hard for me. So I always feel like the best way to really understand an artist is to just do a little bit of a deeper dive into a specific piece instead of talking broadly about their work. So, what's a standout piece to you? Like, do you have a personal favorite, or one that's a sentimental favorite, or one that maybe you feel represents his work? What are we looking at here?
Well, one of them is that 7-panel piece, because it will always remind me of him not being able to move until that was completed. But I actually have two. If we can go into two, and they're for different reasons. One that stands out it's called Better Dreams in Acid Rain.
Okay.
And it's an old piece that's really important for the both of us. And why that is that he painted that during a time where our walls came down. And what I mean is that when you're going through childhood, you're going through your teenage years, you're becoming a young adult, you go through that. And if you've had things in your past that make you put walls up between, right? You never necessarily want somebody to get that close, or you always have that little bit still standing, right?
Yeah.
So there was during this time period, he was working on this piece, and this is a piece where you can see me more predominantly when I had red hair. And I'm in this piece, and it was during this time that I don't know how it happened. We both went, okay, our walls are down now. Now we're going to see everything. And it was just this amazing moment in time that was also captured in this painting. And it's like this pathway that he left. I know it's going to sound strange, but it's this pathway that he painted knowing that someday we'll find each other in there. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's just this piece that I would never be able to sell. And it means so much. It's in my living room. And it's just, there's something about it that I'm so connected to. And it symbolized our love, and that no matter what, we'll always find each other.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the creation of that? I mean, well, obviously you have told me a little bit
Yeah.
about the creation, but like as the art nerd, I always want to know like process. I want to know like, was this one where it's like, okay, you're having these moments and you're, it's all coming out very rapid fire into the work, or it's slowly being revealed? And was this a piece he was working on for months, or was this a piece for hours,
This was definitely months, a piece that he was working on. And what I love about it is the way that he built it. It's on wood.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a larger piece. It's about 4 foot by 4 foot.
Okay.
And the way that he built the outer frame, it's all black. It's just wood. And then it's hollowed out. And on top of that is another piece of wood that he found that he had painted on. And the way that he attached it to the wood, to the subframe almost,
Mhm.
but yet the subframe is all showing. It's the painting is just overlapping in certain parts. And then he left this long diagonal other piece of wood, which it's like raw, and it goes from a very fine point at one end, and then it goes up to all the way to the other side of the painting, and it gets larger to maybe 1.5 inches. It goes from a 1/4 inch to 1.5 inches. And it's just this piece that he left on there that was I don't even know how he thought of it. He just did it. And it's so perfect for the piece. And then this piece is it's more flat as far as the acrylic paint on it.
Mhm.
It's more flat, but the amount of depth that goes into that, even though the paint is flat, it's not as layered,
Mhm.
is also striking. So it's a really interesting piece that is an older piece. And that when he was painting it, to see it come together, but then how he finished it, because his framing was such an integral part of his pieces, especially the large
Yeah.
pieces. He would do stuff that you're like, what? And so my next piece, I'll tell you about that frame.
And before we get into that, I do want to
Yeah.
just ask, if I could,
Please.
when I'm thinking about the process, there are some people who work sort of intuitively, and there are some people who like leap into something. They just like know this is the way to
Yeah.
go. And then there are some people who sort of like check and they're hesitant and they think and they look, and when he took, you said that the piece of the wood, the diagonal stuck on
Yes.
there. Was that a situation where he dry fits it, places it, steps back, looks at it, thinks about it, takes it off, looks back at it, goes back, and then settles on the technique of the addition and the placement? Or was it just like, boom, this is what this needs right here? He just, you see what I'm saying?
Right, I do. And he would have some that were instant, where he's like, no, this is exactly what I'm doing. This is perfect. I'm leaving this exactly as
Mhm.
it is. I know it right now. This is it. Where others he would, and we would talk about it, which was such a beautiful thing that we were able to have conversations about the process and about his framing and what he was thinking for the framing, and ideas. And he would try it and see, and he would step back, and sometimes he put a frame on and then he took the frame back off and said, that's not the one for it. I've got to do it something different, because what he thought was going to work did not work. It would happen sometimes. Yeah.
Can I ask one more peek behind the
Yeah.
curtain? When he talked about his work, because you're saying he would talk and he would be open to those conversations. Did he talk like a normal human being or like an artist's statement? You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do. After being together for 30 years, there is a difference when you live with an artist. No, it would be a mix. Because he what I loved is that he did value my input and he liked to share it with me.
Yeah.
And then if I said, well, have you thought about this? Or "Hey, could you try this?" And there would be somewhere, no, I really want it this way. Well, then it's your painting. You do it
Yeah.
that way. Otherwise he would say, oh, yeah, that might work, and okay, what do you think about this? Let me try this. And I would see so much of the framing before it was finished because he also wanted to show it to me.
Yeah.
So it's like I was that person, some people call it the muse, but it's like I was that person where he could show me, and no matter what, I would tell him honestly how I felt
Yeah. And
about each piece.
well, and I think I feel like confidant feels better than muse. I feel like
Yes.
muse is just someone to be gazed upon and
Right.
inspiration flows from. But it sounds like you had a more of a partnership, and
Yes.
and I think that is wonderful. And that he would take feedback, and trust the source. But it also sounds like he would speak to you in English about it and not be talking about like, how this is, recontextualizing the decontextualized
Oh, no.
democratization of,
No.
the liberated particle board or something.
Oh God, no. No, and if he did, no, he wouldn't speak that way, and he would say no, because
Yeah.
he was in so many ways, he was just straightforward. He just wanted to he wanted to create. That was his life.
Yeah.
And so he was happy when he could just create, so that was, yes. That's a part of it. But now to share this other piece.
Yeah. Go on.
This
Sorry,
was-
I've been sidetracking
No,
you.
no. So this piece, because you may have questions, this piece is from his last series that he painted. And he was sick at this time. And he did this last big group of paintings, which are really some of his best work. And this one is called From the Beginning. So this piece, actually I have it in my office right here. This piece was, I love because he left the corner. I'm going to show you because you're right here. He left the corner. Oh, which way can I do this? I'm trying to do this so you can see it. So he left the corner of the yellow.
Yeah.
Up. He left that open so that you could actually see there.
Yeah.
He left that. That's how he started the painting. So what he did is he loved new beginnings. So this piece, how he started it, he left, and then he went into the rest of it, and created this beautiful dream world in this piece. But yet that the space that he left there, this negative space, which looks like it's not part of the painting, but yet it is, because that's how the painting started.
Mm.
I love this piece so much because of that. And this is another piece that he framed, and he really wanted something unusual. So what he did is he saw the scrap. I own another business, and it's a drapery workroom. And he saw this piece of teal velvet, the scrap of fabric in the trash. And he says, I want to put that on the painting. So on the outside frame, there is teal velvet chenille going all the way around. And then he made a custom metal frame with holes cut out so that peeks through. And so you have this painting with the framing, which it works. It's something. How would you even think that?
Huh. That's an interesting sort of, like, I start to think of the play of the contrasts of the hard and the soft, and the metallic and the fabric that, and it sounds to me like almost woven together, right?
Yes.
Which, I'm sure there's a metaphor in there for so many different situations where there's the good and the bad, the hard and the easy, the cold and the comfortable.
Right.
I think there's a lot to that. I personally just love the notion that he's putting this thought into every element,
Every element.
and to be so deliberate, because like, sometimes you look at stuff and, like Jackson Pollock, it's like, maybe this was just a CIA psyop. Like how did we come to think there's something so deep and meaningful about something like this dude just stumbled around the barn spilling paint on the canvas, and then
Right.
you see somebody who's like doing, and there's merit to Pollock's work. Don't get me
Yes,
wrong.
yes,
I'm
yes.
being a little bit glib here, but there are some Abex pieces where it's like, were you really thinking about this? Or is this just like,
Right.
is this just an easy way to make a buck? Whereas, I love hearing about these artists who are so thoughtful and deliberate about everything. Who are, not just what's on the canvas or the panel, but also what surrounds it, and what is shown and what's not shown, and what's covered, and the play of the positive and the negative, in a piece like that. I think for me, it's very satisfying to find like there is more to it. There's always, the ones who do it well, there really
Yes.
is something there.
It really is. It's his vision. He was always intentional on every detail. So it wasn't just about the painting or what the base was. It was everything that surrounded it, the use of color, as you know, like he was truly a colorist.
Yeah.
And the way that he would mix it and play with it, and the light and the dark, um, I, I don't know what it was. There was something about it, but I love every part of his framing. And I think that each piece is so unique, because he would also find things, here's an old screen printing frame. Here's a ladder I'm going to take apart, and I'm going to make this frame.
Yeah.
Here's all this different type of exotic wood that I'm going to piece together, and then I'm going to put copper on it. And then I'm going to his framing is insane.
Yeah. And I think we're already kind of hinting at it, but to wrap up
Yes.
this one, I do want to ask you, like, what do you see and hope that other people will take away from this work? I hate to say like defining somebody's legacy and everything
Right.
like that, because I feel like it was his to put out there. But like, as you look at the work, I know you've shared some of your thoughts and connections, but what are we hoping people see and appreciate? Or, if we want to be informed viewers, what should we be looking for to appreciate?
Well, I think with his work is not an instantaneous acknowledgement of what is inside that piece. You actually have to spend time with his paintings. So, from morning to afternoon to evening, and how the light changes and where you're standing, you will see different things come out of his work. He really painted it from his subconscious, where all of a sudden you're looking at a piece and images start to reveal themselves. It's like a gift that keeps on giving. It's not, I'm looking at a red dot on a white canvas.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a red dot on a white canvas. His work is a constant gift, where will look at it, and you could be looking at it the same way for 5 years. And in 5 years, you're looking at it and you said, wait, I just now see something completely different. And that's what I love about his work, because he wanted you to go into it. He wanted you to spend time with it. And it's also to just shut everything else out and focus on what's in front of you and feel something. And he, through his work, shared his feelings of nature, of the planet, of humanity, of love, of laughter, of sadness, of anger. All of it's in his paintings. It's just he gave a gift for us to be able to spend time with and to feel something. And so really that was him. He wanted people to feel something.
That is a beautiful sentiment. And I think that is what I think abstract art is at its best, when it just hints at stuff so that you can have these moments of discovery and unexpected connection that will hit you different at different times.
Exactly.
You know? And I think that is what he did wonderfully. And for listeners, if you want to see the work, check out LarryRobertsChicago.com. And also, since I've got you on the phone right now,
Yes.
Laurie, I am going to be, really pushing my boundaries and how much time I can ask of you. Listeners, next week's episode is also going to be featuring Laurie Roberts as she talks about her design work. If I can, not overstay my welcome on this call. So thank you very much for sharing your insights into Larry Roberts and his paintings. And listeners, check out next week's episode as well, because we're going to be talking more with Laurie.
Thank you, Kyle.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.